you. Hi, friends. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Ashley Aireonna, joined by the wonderful Tom Jensen. Hi, Tom. How
Oh,
you doing?
doing well. How are you doing, Ashley?
I'm doing good. The Olympics are over. Is that
Yeah,
how it all? How was your week? I know that you took a little bit
it
of a
was
trip.
great. I went down to San Jose to visit with my dad. I hadn't seen him in a while, and that's our thing is to watch track together. We've done it for over 50 years.
I
So
love
to do that with him was just a joy.
that.
I'm just so lucky to still have him with us. He's 94. He's still active. He's still smart, and it's great to be with him. I just
Oh,
loved
that's
every
so
second of it.
inspiring. That's
Yeah, it's
inspiring too.
very cool.
I love that. That's very, very cool. I got to watch a little bit of it. I didn't watch all of the track and field, but I watched most of it. And the women were just because that's what I watched, were so impressive. They're also just like
Yeah.
beautiful and they look so strong and fast. It's really cool that
Well,
you can.
they were great. They were 65% of the medals for the U.S. in track women.
So crazy. So
Great.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's cool, like, that everyone has like their own little pizzazz, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Even within their performance, like it's cool that you can see personality within that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I thought
Absolutely.
the Olympics were really cool. I also watched some of that final game with USA men's basketball. That was really
Yeah. Great game. Great game.
As like a Warriors fan, I feel like it's exciting when
Yeah. When
the rest
Steph
of the
is
world
so big.
sees Steph
Yeah.
Curry too, because you're like, you get why we're so annoying because he's so amazing when you watch him.
Yeah.
But yeah, so many fun things. But two 49ers news. We had news coming out about 3 hours ago, earlier this afternoon, from Ian Rapport, and it was an update that when you read it felt like it wasn't much of an update and it was just more of a recap of everything that's been happening. Potentially a little bit more final now, which is maybe why he felt the need to put it out like this. But Ian Rapport said, update on Brandon Aiyuk. The Steelers and the 49ers have a deal on the table for a potential trade, and Pitt is in a good place on an Aiyuk contract, sources said. If SF gives the final sign off, it's done. Now, I feel like where the distinction from previous reports would be was there was always reports, or not always, but within the last month, there's been reports that Brandon Aiyuk and the Steelers have a trade within each other that they would like to, the Steelers are willing to pay Brandon Aiyuk, but the Steelers weren't willing to give up enough in return to the 49ers for them to accept that deal. And then there was also the report that, which Ian Rapport says is still true now, San Francisco has an offer out to Aiyuk for a long-term deal for him to stay with the 49ers that he hasn't accepted yet. And so I feel like that was always kind of true. Like the 49ers, it's been reported, and who knows if these numbers have changed within the last couple days, but only last week, Matt Mayoko confirmed that the most recent reporting of the 49ers deal in May was still the deal on the field, which was a deal for $26 million a year, which is below market rate for a second wide receiver, was what the 49ers offered Brandon Aiyuk. And with that in mind, it makes sense that Brandon Aiyuk would have not accepted that offer because as far as previous history with the 49ers, they've lowballed their players and then re-upped negotiations and upped their offer. So to me, it actually makes sense that Brandon Aiyuk wouldn't have accepted the $26 million because it's, like I said, below market rate. It's a huge discount. Like I think even considering him a second wide receiver would be him like kind of giving a home team discount because he feels like he's our first string wide receiver. So the 28 is already kind of a deal. And I was always anticipating the 49ers would be willing to go up to 28. Now, if they've done that within the last 2 days, it's been reported that they've re-engaged in contract negotiations. But Ian Rapport does not give a deal when he says that SF has a deal on the table. He doesn't say the number of the contract. So the last reported confirmed offer that the 49ers gave Brandon Aiyuk was $26 million. Now, the only, in my opinion, difference between this and previous reporting, the reporting today, is that it does say the Steelers and 49ers, so not the Steelers and Aiyuk, but the Steelers and 49ers have a deal on a potential trade. So that to me makes it sound like they've agreed, but then a sentence down it says if SF gives the final send off, it's done. How do you agree on something but it's also not
because
done?
well,
I don't understand. Yeah.
Well, it's tough to sort all this out, but reading between the lines, it seems to me that the Niners want to make one last attempt at reaching a deal with Aiyuk, and we don't know if that's long-term deal, $26 million, or if they've upped their offer. We have no way of knowing. But that's always been where Aiyuk has been, is I want Amon-Ra St. Brown's money plus a little bit more. He's never moved off that position. The Niners have never offered it. Are they offering it now? If so, that would become an interesting thing. But there's some talk that the negotiations have gone so poorly that both sides are kind of at a point of, I just want this over with, and that Aiyuk is not happy with the Niners, and that the Niners are frustrated with Aiyuk. So it could be that they burned the bridge already and they can't cross it or rebuild a new one, which would lend itself to Aiyuk getting dealt. But when that would happen, hard to say. But everybody needs to sign off on it. Clearly, the Niners have not signed off on it yet. But if the rumors are true that both sides are pretty frustrated with the other, that would seem to indicate that they're not going to reach an extension for Aiyuk to stay in San Francisco. And then it's a question of, okay, what's Pittsburgh offering? There are some rumors that Pickens, their wide receiver, is now in a deal. There are other rumors that he's not, and we'll just have to see. But my expectation at this point is Aiyuk would get traded, given that the Niners and Aiyuk are not exactly seeing eye to eye right now.
Do you think that the 49ers have offered Brandon Aiyuk a comparable offer to what the Steelers are willing to pay him, or no?
We don't know. No, that's the thing. All we know is what Rapport has said, in addition to the rumors. So the Niners and Steelers have a deal in place. We don't know what that is. Aiyuk and the Niners are in one last stage of final attempt at a negotiation to get an extension to stay here. And apparently, according to rumor, that hasn't gone well. So given those options, the Niners would then be left with, you can keep Aiyuk and roll him over in a fifth-year option. He'll be angry, he'll hold out, and he'll be a distraction. Or you just take the loss in the trade and send him out. I think that based on what Kyle Shanahan had to say last week, that he'd prefer to just cut bait and move on.
Well, with that assumption, I want to ask you, I think that Heck Dal has an interesting question, which is, could it be possible that Aiyuk is stalling because he actually wants to stay with the 49ers? Mike Silver did a report after talking with George Kittle, and Aiyuk seems to want a trade, but to a very specific team. Like, if he really wanted out, he would have taken the New England deal, which was the highest paying $32 million. He would have been only behind Justin Jefferson, which is, I'm a big supporter of Aiyuk, but that's crazy good money for him. Now, that's also career suicide, which potentially, if he cares about, being in history books and getting that championship, which we saw him super emotional after the 49ers loss of the Super Bowl last year. So I would think it's safe to assume that competing is important to him. So maybe it makes sense. Okay, he didn't want to go to the Patriots, but then the Cleveland offer, I feel like as a wide receiver, you can convince yourself that Cleveland is a team that if Deshaun Watson returns to, above mediocre ability, that team could be competing, because they were doing good last year with their backup quarterback. And I know Watson has had a couple down years, but previously to that, he was considered a top 10 quarterback.
Right.
So maybe with Aiyuk, who obviously feels confident in himself, you could think, hey, I'm going to make this quarterback better. They already have a great defense. Their coach just won Coach of the Year not too long ago. Was that last year or the year before that? So it is kind of interesting that he said no to Cleveland, because that was also a deal. It feels like the 49ers were more than willing. They looked at Amari Cooper as kind of a plug and play for Aiyuk for this year, but then someone whose contract ends next year, so they can kind of renegotiate that when they are looking.
It was ideal for the Niners. That was a great trade for them. Yeah. For Aiyuk, I think that what he's really after is trust and comfort zone. And so he would have trust in Washington because he'd be playing with Jaden Daniels, his friend from Arizona State. Or he would have trust in Pittsburgh because he has trust in Mike Tomlin. And I think that that's what it's about. It's not about contending. It's about Aiyuk feeling comfortable and valued. And he thinks that he would be in Washington or Pittsburgh only. And I think that's why he turned down Cleveland and New England, because he wants to get traded on his terms. Washington or Pittsburgh, that's it.
But he's not a free agent. Like, I feel like there is some of
Well, but he is in essence, because he can approve or not sign a trade. You know, he can say, I'm not going to sign an extension, and then you get in the same situation that the Jets are in now with Hassan Reddick, where you trade for a guy, but you don't have his new contract agreement, and so it's a mess. And that's what teams want to avoid. So they want to trade for Aiyuk, but only if he signs a new deal. So everything is dictated by Aiyuk. I want my contract, my team, my terms. And unless that happens, I'm not going to agree to anything with the Niners. So he holds out and he waits for Washington or Pittsburgh. Now here's Pittsburgh. And the Niners are saying, choose Pittsburgh or choose us. We'll contend. They won't. I think that's missing what Aiyuk is after. Aiyuk is after trust and value. He thinks Pittsburgh values him more, and he trusts Tomlin more than the Niners.
Is it wrong that I'm kind of under the assumption that if their deals are comparable, that Aiyuk would choose to stay with the 49ers? I don't know. I just feel like it can't be that bad unless he's just being extremely strategic and knows that he'll end up being with the Steelers. I mean, he's taking a big risk, taking the entire preseason and training camp off. And if the 49ers do call his bluff, is he really going to sit out all these games? Does he feel like that affects his future potential? If so, is it worth it for the 49ers to have a guy come in midway through the season who's going to obviously want to perform versus having future draft picks? What are they going to get back from the Steelers that makes it worth it to trade Aiyuk? Or is it more?
We don't know, but the latest rumor is George Pickens is now in the deal, but nobody's confirmed that. It's just people talking. Now, if that's true, then the Niners get a receiver back and they get a young receiver that can play, and then it makes sense for them to let Aiyuk go because they've got a replacement. But whether that's what's actually going to go down, we don't know.
I think Pickens is a bad fit for the Kyle Shanahan system. He's gone on record to the media and explained why he doesn't feel like wide receivers should engage in blocking. Like, Kyle Shanahan's going to see that and be like, no, I don't want this guy. I don't know. I think unless...
Well, he might not have a choice. You know, just beggars can't be choosers. I mean, the Niners can't say, well, gee, I want to make a trade with Pittsburgh for picks, and I want to trade those picks for a receiver that fits my system and that's willing to block. What are the chances of making that trade? 0.000000001.
Player that you already have.
There ain't no way you're making that trade and getting all of that. It's just not happening. I'm like,
well, I have a follow-up to that then. Do you think that by not paying Brandon Aiyuk now, because the idea is that down the road, you know, Brock Purdy's going to be making more money. Is it going to be worth it to have a wide receiver on your team that's making this much money and a quarterback that's paid top value? If you look at the history, most quarterbacks and wide receiver duos, one or both of them are on their rookie contract when they've won a Super Bowl. And so I think that the way the 49ers are looking at it is like, maybe this is not a smart business move. But my retort to that would be, how are you looking ahead and basically the 49ers are saying, well, we want to make sure to open up our Super Bowl window in the future. And I'm saying, you don't have a Super Bowl now. So I think that all options should be exhausted now, and that they're actually going about planning this wrong. Like, if they would have won the Super Bowl last year, which honestly, we're going to get into it with the injuries and everything. But it seems like that was really the year. But if you're trying to win it all now, should you also be taking into consideration the future when you might jeopardize this last year with Brock Purdy on a rookie contract?
Well, they keep trying to extend the window, but the window is Trent. So your window really is this year and then whatever else you can get done. But the window gets smaller and smaller with each successive year. Their best chance of returning to the Super Bowl is now. And then it's smaller going forward. Logan Henry saying, you're chatting Pickens is not going to SF. I agree with you, Logan. I don't think it's going to happen. I'm just reporting what's been rumored, and that's going around Twitter right now, is Pickens might be in the deal. I doubt it, but I wanted to say that that's what's being rumored. That's all.
Yeah. Mr. Corey says, I still think Aiyuk isn't going anywhere. The 49ers can't be this dumb to trade him a month before the season. It does feel like they'll look like they have egg on their face. I think the decision that they're coming up on is Aiyuk has put out there that he is absolutely not going to play on the 5th-year option. And I think it was Ryan Hensley, who I have tons of respect for, quote tweeted that report and said, well, he doesn't really have a choice. If they don't play him, what is he going to do? And to some extent, that's true. He will be playing next year if the 49ers don't get rid of him. But he can sit out for multiple games, which we haven't seen people do. And earlier on in this season, I was thinking, why would Brandon Aiyuk do that? That could tarnish his value. But it kind of feels like the teams that are willing to trade for him right now, I don't think would be dissuaded if this did end up going into next year, because he's already missed training camp. What's missing a couple games? If you believed in him at this point, I think you'll believe in him after. And you have to remember, with preseason games happening, I was reminded of this when I saw Trey Lance playing for the Cowboys. The 49ers supposedly don't like these distractions, and morale is extremely low right now in the 49ers facility for tons of reasons. Sure. Now, I would think that the way to raise that the most would be to immediately sign Trent and Brandon Aiyuk back to your team and inject some hope in, unity back into this group. However, maybe they feel like having a disgruntled BA where some of the players might feel like, hey, why aren't you paying this guy? This is ridiculous. And other players might feel like he's being selfish. I mean, if they were willing to give up the guy that they, traded the overall number 3 pick for because they thought he was going to be a distraction, maybe they don't want the number 1 story of Jets versus 49ers week 1 to be Brandon Aiyuk is sitting out. Maybe they're not willing to take it that far. I mean, there's been an entire training camp. Trent Williams is not on the field and people aren't even talking about it because of how much buzz this 49ers Brandon Aiyuk stuff is getting. I know we have people in here asking if this is official. Ian Rapport is the one that is reporting that these deals are done. And we've had everything from local to national media and so on making this Brandon Aiyuk storyline the number 1 report of the offseason. And I don't know if the 49ers want that to be the case. So they might want to
probably not. I would think that based on what Shanahan said in the press conference last week, he was asked, can you deal with not having Aiyuk? And he says, yes, I have a solution. So that shows that Kyle has already thought this through and that he's confident that he can move forward without Brandon. And you've got also rumors on the side saying that it's getting contentious between the Niners and Aiyuk, which would lend itself to what you were just saying, that the Niners might want to move on from the distraction and just say that we need to focus on this upcoming year. We've been distracted long enough with the Aiyuk stuff. Just trade him, get it over with. However, if they trade Aiyuk, they're trading him in August. It's organizational malpractice.
Yeah,
they're not going to get good value back. And it's basically just waving the white flag and saying that, we think we're better off moving on at this point. And I think that may well be where it ends. Somebody's going to have to take the loss here. Aiyuk was never willing to take less than market value. The Niners were never willing to pay market value. And so that lent itself to driving off a cliff together. Fifth-year option, Aiyuk holds out. And that's what I predicted all summer long. And that's basically how it's played out. But now, how will it play out? I think it will finally end with the Niners just saying that we've had enough. I think they'll end up taking the L and making the trade. But Lynch hates taking the L in a trade, and I think that's part of the delay. And part of it also is just that, why are we doing this? It doesn't help the team A to do this.
They have so much other bad news coming out of the 49ers camp right now that I feel like they might just want to hold off on letting, if the report that Ian Rapport tweeted today is true, that trade is agreed upon, but they don't have the final send-off yet, it could just be the 49ers are in an awful place right now where they just canceled joint practices. Their star running back is injured. All their rookies are injured. I mean, they have injuries on every position group and in all levels of importance. So they just might be in a situation where they feel like they can't deal with just another blow. Deommodore Lenoir had his press conference yesterday, and he was saying he was disappointed about joint practices being canceled just because, one, he wants to be able to take it out on another team and be able to practice against another team. But also, it was in joking fashion, but he said, we're sick of each other. And there's always a little truth to a joke. And I'm sure that teams feel this way. I'm not saying this means the 49ers are doomed. I think that this is probably very common in training camp when you're there sweating your ass off for so many days in a row. But it does feel like this team is in a fragile situation where we've seen them rally together and get through losing streaks and get through injury lulls within the regular season. But usually at this point of the season is when unity and morale is most high. When we go back to last year, this is when they were the most determined to get back to that NFC Championship game, to have this path of redemption and prove to the rest of the NFL that they were the number one team like they thought they were. And that energy has not been felt at training camp so far.
No.
And it feels scary.
Well, last time they went to the Super Bowl, the year coming out of it, they had a rash of injuries. And now here's this year, same thing. It's you don't have enough time for your body to recover. And the Niners being the NFC Championship game in consecutive years, and then the Super Bowl, they don't have enough time in their bodies to rest. And that's why the injuries pile up. You don't have enough time off in the offseason because you're playing so many playoff games that your body just wears out. And that's what we're seeing now, is that this core is old to begin with, and add all these extra playoff games every single year. There's no bad year, there's no down year where they don't play playoff games. They always do. And so the body has the odometer ticking madly, and that's part of why you're getting all these injuries. And so we'll see how things are going. But I think that for the Niners, there's really not a lot they can do with this, given the animosity they have with Aiyuk, that I think that they aren't willing to just swallow their pride and say, okay, here's the fair market value offer you've been waiting for all season. We'll finally give it to you. Here you go. Now stay. It might be that Aiyuk is just so frustrated with the Niners now that he's willing to move on. Steelers fans in the chat saying 5th round pick, give me a break. That ain't going to happen. No. Look what Lynch did with Garoppolo. Garoppolo was somebody that Lynch valued more than the rest of the league, and he refused to trade him as a result. Ended up just moving on from Garoppolo by letting him go in free agency. They could do that with Aiyuk eventually. Steeler fans hoping to get Aiyuk for bargain bin rates ain't happening, guys. If there's no player, it's a second round.
What do you mean? Like, they're already going to get him at a bargain rate?
Well, they are, but they're not going to get him at a ridiculous bargain rate. Yeah, you're not going to get Brandon Aiyuk at a flea market, and that's what this talk is. If there's picks, it's a second rounder and some other pick later. If there's a player, then it's that player and then calibrated to his value, second, third, fourth, whatever. But to think that you could get Brandon Aiyuk, a second-team All-Pro player, for a fifth-round pick, stop being so homer. No, that ain't happening.
Really quickly, because we have some comments about Christian McCaffrey, but before I get into the injuries, the last thing that I wanted to do, because I wanted to look back at last season, and Dan Orlovsky recently, I don't know why he did this, in my opinion, kind of last minute, because it felt like over a month ago is when most people were doing their QB rankings, but Dan Orlovsky recently did his QB rankings, and Brock Purdy was very high in a lot of the categories. And Brock Purdy has had an up and down training camp. Now, people like to say that training camp interceptions don't matter. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. When I was looking at the preseason game, I felt like the quarterbacks were under a lot of pressure, and I could see how in the regular season, although I am very confident in Brock Purdy's ability to escape and navigate pressure and throw down the field on the run if needed to, and in Kyle to scheme things up. With so many injury things happening, this offensive line is a little bit dangerous, and Brock Purdy, he wants to get paid. And so I was thinking, what is in his best interests for this year? And by the way, what's best for Brock Purdy is what's best for the 49ers, because if he's healthy and performing at the level he has been performing at, more likely that they're going to make it all the way back to the Super Bowl, playoffs, and so on. So Brock Purdy's targets last season, someone also commented that the solution to the Aiyuk thing is to just run the ball down their throats, play physical defense. I do think that running the ball is always going to be a staple in the Kyle Shanahan system. Sure. And obviously that the run game and the defense is something he leans on, but they have moved a little bit more pass forward since Brock Purdy's taken over. Although obviously, like, compared to the Chiefs and so on, very run heavy. But last year alone, with Christian McCaffrey as good as he was, Deebo Samuel, a little bit of a down year, but let's look at Brock Purdy's targets from last season. The number one targeted guy that he threw to was 116 targets to Brandon Aiyuk. So
not a lot.
Second after that is Deebo Samuel at 106, Christian McCaffrey 103, George Kittle 99, Juwan Jennings 45. Now, I guess if you take away these Aiyuk targets, I think what a lot of people were assuming is those targets are going to go to Ricky. One, he's injured. Two, the wide receiver coach himself came out and said he doesn't even feel confident in Ricky going against Ambry Thomas, who, one, is injured now as well, but two, was playing in the very first preseason game, so you can tell how highly they think of him. And they didn't even want Ricky going against him in practice because they didn't want Ambry to be able to pick Ricky off in it to demolish his confidence. So no matter how highly you think or how much you think Ricky can improve and maybe eventually turn into an Aiyuk type, he is certainly not there right now, and I would not expect that from him this season. What I would expect if you were to divvy up the 116 targets, which is a lot of targets, is I would think, or I would hope, that George Kittle is targeted way more. He is coming off an injury, but he's one of the few veterans that is healthy at this point, at least healthy enough to go to practice and actually work out, not just on a side field. Juwan Jennings, I think, plays a similar role to a tight end, to be honest, but can obviously catch that ball. So a few more targets to him. And then if Debo is in so much better shape than, last year, which is something he's been trying to prove, then I would also anticipate more targets going to him. Now, the issue with that is Brandon Aiyuk plays a very specific role on this team that is not easily replicated by any of the other guys. Even, by the way, I left out Christian McCaffrey. The majority of McCaffrey's targets, although he is obviously an impressive running back with the capability to catch the ball, he's not like, if you only look at him from like a wide receiver perspective, he's not getting like tons of yards. He's a great dump off option for when the other guys might get open.
Yeah, it's a check down
in Brock's face. Exactly. So I don't necessarily think you want to plan to give him that many more targets, especially being said, at least for right now, he's suffering with a calf injury that the calf is connected to the Achilles, and that can be scary very fast.
Yeah.
Robert Williams said that he liked Xavier Legette.
So did I, but yeah, he got hurt.
Interesting. Yeah. I was thinking, is that the one that the Chiefs just got?
No, that's Xavier Worthy from Texas. Yeah.
That's the one that I wish that they would have got, because I feel like he might
have been who they wanted, because the Chiefs traded up ahead of the Niners to get him.
Yeah.
And the Niners were targeting speed in this draft. So I think the Niners very well could have been interested in Xavier Worthy.
If the 49ers do let go of Brandon Aiyuk, what do you anticipate that they do with that 116 targets? Where do you think that those go, and how do they make up for having the lack of deep guy who can get in without being schemed open?
Well, it might force them to hang on to players that can go deep. So Chris Conley is getting targeted in the preseason game, for example. They will try to Frankenstein guys to fit into all of the different Aiyuk roles, where you're going to have 5 guys who collectively can do what one Aiyuk can. I think that's what Kyle's going to do. The problem with that is that it then telegraphs what you're going to do. Now, if you have Ricky Pearsall out there, then you know what he's going to do and what he can't do. If you have Juwan Jennings out there, you know that it's more likely that he's going to go for shallower targets and also be a run blocker. So they're going to advertise what they do, because they don't have the same versatility that Aiyuk brings of having 5 great skills that he can do to make the offense far less predictable. Now that you Frankenstein in the pieces to create an Aiyuk collectively, it's much easier for the defense to figure out what the Niners are doing. But I would expect that Juwan Jennings is going to get more targets and more time because he's such a good run blocker.
Improved role. Now, I can't pronounce this. Cognoscience, that guy, says the saga is unlikely to be concluded anytime soon, in my opinion. It does feel like there's been a recycling and repeating of a similar report for the last month, and then, even prior to that, pretty clear that Brandon Aiyuk knew his value, wanted that, and was going to hold out if he didn't get it. But there's been reports that maybe this is sort of coming to an end. I know that David Lombardi said that this is all according to the plan, and that the 49ers were anticipating that the actual deadline was going to be mid-August. Now, I find that silly, because Kyle himself came out and said, when talking about injured players, that he worries about guys who suffer from injury, because if you're not getting to football shape now because you're injured, think about this. He was making a quote about injured players, but this not only applied to Brandon Aiyuk, but also to Trent Williams, where he said the issue is if you miss training camp with an injury, then once you're getting into the regular season, you're doing install, all that. And so you're trying to get into shape in this 4-day window before the game. And then the next week you're rehabbing from the game while still trying to get into football shape. You miss this critical period. And the way Kyle said it is basically you're playing catch up all year and you never quite get to your peak health. And I think George Kittle is someone who we can look at as a demonstration of that. Not this year, I'm not trying to put that on him, but in previous years, you've seen him end the season on an injury, rehab it all off season, kind of go into the season rehabbing his injury, kind of nicked up. He gets a little bit healthier around, the end of the regular season playoff time, and then he gets injured in the playoffs. And it's basically he just never had a healthy enough period to add on to his development and improve himself, and also to kind of build up that callus. And building up the callus is what Kyle specifically said is important to do now because it's so difficult to do in the regular season. Now, Kyle,
you need ramp up time in camp.
Yeah.
And that's both to get into true football shape and to build up the body armor so that you're better prepared to handle recovery from games. You end up not being able to recover until you get to the bye, and you might get to the bye and be hurt. So it's like what we saw with Bosa last year, where it's just he was never really truly himself until you got to the end of the year.
Yeah.
And that would probably be the
By
case.
The way, are you worried about that?
And with
Are
Trent,
you worried about that now?
Yeah,
like Bosa
sure I am. Yeah.
wasn't able to go.
But then I don't think that Aiyuk is going to be on this team, or not going to play on it anytime soon. So there we are with that. With Trent, Trent's a unicorn. Trent doesn't need and doesn't practice anyway. Because Trent's 36 now, so he deliberately takes time off where he doesn't practice during the week, most weeks, regardless. But that Trent comes into the season where he's relatively healthy and where he's put in the work to be ready to play. We said the same thing about Bosa last year. He didn't start well. So Trent could have the same thing where he's 90% Trent, but not 100, and that can hurt, where the team doesn't have the full capacity of the player. And for a player like Trent Williams that the Niners depend on so heavily, that could be a problem to open the year when Trent is not necessarily in full football shape or be fully prepared to recover from each game.
Especially because from all reports in previous seasons, Trent Williams was a guy who got multiple vet days off during the regular season, the week of the regular season.
By design.
Who already didn't practice much.
Yeah.
So when you think that those are critical times where maybe in order to play catch up, he would need to practice through that. But now you're in this situation where we were talking about the Olympics. Runners know this. You can't speed up the process of getting into shape. So
no shortcuts.
You miss all training camp, and then you play a game, and the next day you're a little bit banged up from the game. You're using that time to rehab from being banged up from the game, not to add on to some sort of skill. You're only trying to get to the baseline. And if your baseline, because you didn't participate in football in the off season, if your baseline is not football shape, you're just constantly just trying to stay there. You don't ever really get higher.
Yeah, you're always playing catch up the entire year until you get to the bye week. And then you have to get to the bye week healthy. And that's a stretch for some. And especially for Trent, someone that's missed 3 games a year. And so they're going to have to factor all that in. But yeah, it's, as Kyle said, is that you're always playing catch up. You can never get ahead of the curve because you can never put in the advanced time to get in better shape if you're always having to recover from that week's game.
Are you worried that this season could end up being a 2020 season?
Yeah.
Speaking of all the injuries that we've slightly mentioned, the 49ers were supposed to have joint practices against the Saints this week in Irvine, starting, I think it was supposed to be Thursday and Friday. Then they have their preseason game on Sunday. Now, Kyle Shanahan has spoke multiple times about how he values these joint practices more than any of the preseason games and more than individual practices that the team does within themselves. It allows them to work out things that and practice things that they don't want to give up. So they don't want other teams to get film on them in preseason. So it allows them to work with their starters. Kyle Shanahan and just the Shanahan branch don't usually play much of their starters in these preseason games. I don't think Sean McVay plays them at all. Same thing with LaFleur. Most of his starters don't. And Kyle Shanahan previously, the last few years, has only had starters play in like a quarter of the last game. Now, a big reason for this is he usually has starters go all out in these joint practices, practicing things that he now knows teams won't be able to get film on because it's not on record, and they can go be tested against a scheme or against a defense that doesn't already know what's coming. Because when you're practicing against yourself, the defense is more keen on how to stop you and you know how to stop them, but it gives you more of a test for a real game when you're practicing against other players. That's why a lot of times
that's the value of it.
And you hear like players from opposing teams get in fights with each other during these practices. Like they really, by the way, I hope that Matthew, rolling, hopefully everyone can hear us. I think we're okay because other people are tuning in. But if our sound is going in and out, let us know. But so I felt like in order for Kyle to cancel something that he values so much, that the injuries must be really bad. Prior to the preseason game against the Titans, the 49ers had 23 players miss that practice previously. And then in the Titans game, more players suffered from injury. Really scary and discouraging that they're suffering with this many injuries this close to the start of the season. And how do you feel about that? Like,
well, I think we're in deja vu. It's the first Kansas City Super Bowl coming out of that year. What happened? Injuries, tons of them. What's happening this year? Injuries, tons of them. It's just there's a lot that they would like to get done, but they're just not healthy. And with so few games to recover, you're playing into February when you make a Super Bowl. You don't have enough time to recover. And we see this in all team sports. When you don't have enough time to recover, you get hurt the following season. That happens in the NBA. It happens in the NFL. And the Niners saw it happen to them after the first Kansas City Super Bowl. So this isn't anything that we're surprised by. I expected a lot of injuries. I didn't expect this much. The problem is that it's not just the vets that are getting hurt, it's the rookies. Yeah. And you need the rookies to be healthy to step in. And here we are. It's just, Ricky Pearsall can't get on the field. Come on now. And then on top of that, you've got all the other injuries they already had in terms of Greenlaw and Hufanga. So they're really behind the eight ball to start the season. That you've got a dysfunctional team. You got Trent Williams that still isn't playing yet. Brandon Aiyuk's status is still not certain. Until you have cost certainty, you can't move on to taking care of Trent. So everything is just this ball of confusion going into the first week. Doesn't bode well for them. Plus CMC is hurt. And so if CMC is hurt and Trent's not 100%, and the way you beat the Jets is on the run game, that doesn't look good. It's just it's going to be a lot harder to beat the Jets in the first week.
I'm really interested in Robin the Bay's comment, who said this feels like 2014, similar to Harbaugh's last season. I was bringing up 2020, obviously coming off the Super Bowl, and then all the injury-plagued years that happened. People are saying Mason time, so obviously he has some fresh tread on his tires. And
he played well against Tennessee in that first drive.
Very, very good. Now, I would love if you could maybe – did you, going into the 2014 season with Harbaugh, did you realize that maybe there was a turning that was happening? Could you feel?
Yeah. Because that season felt like, okay, we've climbed the mountain. Now what? It just seems like they were kind of going to be in free fall, and then that's what happened. Hopefully that doesn't happen this year, but we'll see. Mitchell and Ness asking me in the chat, if Purdy goes down this year for whatever reason, will Kyle be in the hot seat? No. Part of the problem here is that Jed York rewards money. And so as long as Shanahan produces home playoff games, that's pure profit. That's the money Jed seeks. And that is job certainty for Shanahan. It's only when they don't make the playoffs 2 consecutive years then he's on the hot seat. And it might be that Kyle may decide that he needs to move on anyway, because you'll get to a 10-year window where it's just, okay, you've been here for 10 years, what have you done? But I think that Jed would like to keep Kyle because Kyle is the golden goose. He keeps producing the home playoff golden eggs. And as long as he does that, he'll have a job.
Does Kyle get a pass if there's injuries, or does that add to more of a hot seat?
The Niners were, prior to last year, the Niners were the most injured team in the league for Shanahan's tenure as head coach. So they didn't do anything. They weren't concerned by it.
Insulate or stop that problem. By the way, this offseason, I feel like I said this in my instant reaction to the Titans game, the preseason game that the 49ers just had. But in my opinion, the number one goals coming into this offseason were bolster up that offensive line and then make sure that your necessary veterans are happy, signed, and ready to play. They did add Dominic Puni, who, although had a little bit of struggles, I felt like did decent for his first game and has a runway to take over that right guard position, with John Feliciano having a week-to-week, potentially month-to-month injury, and then Spencer Burford also out. So he has a runway to take over. Honestly, I feel like the 49ers with the injuries are hoping that he, can take over.
Yeah, but the danger with Puni is that
let me know.
He's a rookie, and therefore he doesn't have yet NFL starter core strength, which is something you need to succeed, especially in the run game, where you can get the push to the point of attack. And Puni did well in the pass pro, but he didn't have a good game in the run blocking. And that's a pure function of not having the core strength yet. So if you start Puni, that's the danger of doing that, is that he's not going to have the same level of strength and therefore not the same level of success as, even as strange as it may sound to us, Feliciano will have more success in the run game because he has the NFL core strength, because he can get a push to the point of attack. So whether Puni stays as the starting right guard will depend on health. We'll see what Spencer Burford can do, but I'm worried about this offensive line because even if you have Puni, at least you get somebody that's skilled in pass protection, but in the run game, he's not going to be even what you get from Feliciano.
Yeah. And Kyle was talking about one of the number one things, one of the excuses. To me, it was not a good reason, but it was the reason he gave. So more of an excuse that he gave for not trading up and adding to that offensive line even more was he said continuity is the most important. Continuity is the most important. Well, now they're all freaking injured. So they're not practicing better anyways.
So much for continuity.
Yeah, exactly. But it also scares me when I think the 2 years that the 49ers have made it to the Super Bowl, they've started the season with a healthy quarterback and a healthy starting running back, and they've gone into the Super Bowl with their healthy number one running back and their healthy number one quarterback. And it looked like it looked like, especially with Josh Dobbs, I was like impressed by him just because he got out of that game not injured. I mean, that offensive line was
behind that line.
And it's terrifying to think of Purdy back there. If they don't get this Trent Williams deal done, they're not making the playoffs, in my opinion.
No,
and I don't think that's fair. I think that's a fair assumption to make. And
right.
At some point, I feel like it's unfair for Kyle Shanahan to get the excuse of injuries when some of this they should have been able to look ahead and say, we need to get this deal done, or we need to solidify a second solution, or like a plan B. And they're instead of doing neither in multiple areas of their team, and just the morale feels really down. Like, I can't believe this is how we're talking about a team that just came off, a Super Bowl run and is supposed to be going into, their last revenge tour, their last year with all these veteran players. You think next year they're probably going to want to move off of Dre Greenlaw, think of George Kittle, all these vets. Like, the team's going to look much different. This was supposed to be one last year of them all together, and it feels like sliding into the final weeks before the first regular season. They're actually switching it up right now, and we're not prepared to do so.
Yeah. So we're going to have to see how they do that. But yeah, it looks like they're sliding into the year. And when they don't start the year 4-0, they don't get the 1 seed. They don't go to the Super Bowl. Ricardo, hello from Norway. Yeah. Good comeback by Jakob Ingebrigtsen in the 5K. Hello from the North Bay, Rob. Moonman, is this going to be a more absolute defensive team? I think that the difference this year is that they're going to have to look toward different fronts, 5-man fronts, for example, and also play a lot more simulated pressure now that they've got DBs that can blitz.
Now, for everyone who doesn't know, Kalia Davis, who did have a good showing in the preseason game, he is going to be injured for potentially until the middle of this next season. He has to get a knee surgery. Kyle Shanahan said there's something floating behind his knee. He wouldn't say for certain if it was ACL, MCL, but he's undergoing surgery and they don't anticipate that he'll be back till the middle of the season. How are you feeling about this defensive line and defense in general? I'm
worried about the line. I don't think that we're seeing a great level of play yet, though I do like Leonard Floyd, and I think that people are sleeping on the impact that he can have. We have to remember what this 49er defensive line looked like when it had Dee Ford healthy, and that's what I think Leonard Floyd can provide. But defensive tackles, I don't think we're seeing great defensive tackle play, and we're seeing them miss Eric Armstead as it stands right now. And maybe they can develop. We'll see. Gross Matos and the other guys that they added this year in terms of inside D-line help, we'll see. Someone suggested in the chat to go get Ridgeway. I think that's a good idea. He's someone, Leon. I think that's someone that knows the system that could plug in, and I think that'd be a good move because you're going to lose Kalia Davis probably for most of the year, and it may be that you want to put him on the PUP list for all of the year. Part of the danger of their draft strategy, if we're going to take these guys that are hurt late, is they stay hurt. Kalia Davis hasn't been healthy.
And it sucks. Is like there's been a lot of hype around his body and his size and ability when he is, but he's starting his career off in a Javon Kinlaw way where he's not been able to add to his frame and to his technique because he just hasn't been healthy enough for long enough to do that. And I'm not trying to say like that's bad on him. It's shitty injury luck, but definitely sucks. And Mr. Corey says something similar. He hasn't proven himself in the regular season. I would argue he hasn't had the opportunity, had the health to yet.
Well, he hasn't given himself the opportunity by being healthy. Health is an absolute in the NFL.
That's the number one, right? Availability is the best ability. So, and talking is the best thing that you can do on a podcast. So me and Kalia Davis both need to work on our jobs. But I did want to address Ray. He says the 49ers health and the head of health and player performance, Ben Peterson, left. Is that the reason for all these injuries? I did a few weeks ago to even months ago point out that I was nervous, and it might be less of Ben Peterson was so good. I'm not saying he's not, because he did leave people behind that were working with him to take over when he left. But what I think could be an issue, one is just in general, the 49ers are a little bit of an older team. Even their draft picks, there's two separate things. The guys that are already on their team are older veterans who have had a ton of wear and tear. The 49ers play a very physical style of football, and they've played that style for about an extra season compared to teams that haven't consistently made the postseason. So you have to think, even if every team was playing the same number of games every year, the 49ers would already be taking more of a beating because their style of football is to not protect themselves. It is to hit and be tough and be physical. I think the Rams, the Cowboys, there's been rival teams that have talked about the 49ers play a style that they call body bag football, where when other teams who play football every week play the 49ers, they say it's such a different level that they have to prepare themselves to go through more rehab the next week following a game with the 49ers. A fun thing to cue up for your brains could be the Eagles game, once the Eagles lost to the 49ers and suffered the gut punch that the 49ers brought them, they didn't win another game. And players went on to talk to media after that game and just said that the physicality, I mean, I know people talk about the Lions and Dan Campbell talking about biting kneecaps. Kyle Shanahan, maybe he doesn't go out and say it, but that is the standard that he holds for his team. And he doesn't just hold that standard for game day. He's been known to put people in the doghouse and shun them or put them in the back, at the back of the roster if they're not going all out in regular practice. Tart, sorry, I was thinking this is fucked up. I couldn't remember his name, and I was like, the guy that dropped the ball. He did so many good things. I feel bad that that's what he's known for. But Tart, who was a safety on the 49ers, he ended up going to the Eagles after they let him go. And he said but practice and camp-wise, that the rehab was so much different on the Eagles. And the Eagles are also a team that people consider to be physical. So you have to imagine that the 49ers are consistently putting that extra brunt on their team, even if all the games were the same. Then add in that they're playing extra games each year because they've either gotten to the NFC Championship game or the Super Bowl. And then so that's the veterans. Then you go to the rookies. Well, rookies are already at a disadvantage and more likely, especially for soft tissue injuries, because they're right after their college football game, they're training for the combine, they're training for the draft. And then if you guys have ever, even in, high school sports or, middle school sports, if you've ever wanted to impress your coach or your teammates, you might train a little bit harder. Maybe you don't feel like you quite belong yet. Your body's not quite ready. You're going from JV to varsity. So you're going to put a little oomph on that. And that's what a lot of these rookies do. And unfortunately, it leads to injury because they're just overtrained before the season even starts. So I think
they're forced to peak multiple times. You have to peak for your college season. You have to peak for Indy and what's going on there and all the draft testing. And then you have to peak to get ready for the upcoming season in camp. And it's too much to ask of any athlete to peak 3 times within a 6-month window. And that's what happens with these guys. And that's part of why they get hurt. But you also have to factor that into who you're drafting. You're drafting Ricky Pearsall. Going in, he's not that effective against physical play, and he can get banged up. And so this doesn't come as a surprise. So part of it is, Ben Peterson, missing him, that was a blow. But part of it also is just not enough recovery time. And part of it is who they draft. Is that if you take fragile players, they get hurt. Oops, gee, who would have thought that? So factors in. They chose Ricky Pearsall over more physical receivers with their first pick. And that's Kyle saying that, I prefer these skill sets over somebody who has the battle armor to go through. And it could be that Pearsall next year, once he does have the chance to power up, will be fine going forward. But you had a chance to take a rookie wide receiver who was more physical, who could have handled this. You chose not to. He chose skills. That's an active choice by your de facto GM, and it factors into the injury thing.
I have a question. Do you think that it's possible that the Fred Warner injury is a bigger deal than has been let on? He missed 3 practices in a row so far. He was one of the guys that did travel with the team, and obviously a lot of players weren't even cleared to travel. But I just feel like that could be. Is it fair to say that I feel like especially with Greenlaw already out, that I feel like losing a guy like Fred Warner is as impactful as like Nick Bosa going down for that defense?
Yeah, well, Fred, especially without Greenlaw, is that's the blow. Is that Warner is the brains of the defense, and Warner plus Greenlaw is how you shut down the run. I like the flashes of what we saw from D. Winters in terms of his ability and speed to go. Physically, he's there, being able to pursue sideline to sideline. Mentally, he's not in terms of reading the play and getting the right pursuit angle and then wrapping up. So there's a lot of work to be done, but winners will get the reps now because they'll have to. And there won't be a choice. But yeah, missing Fred, huge. Missing Hufanga. I mean, it's not just the players, but it's also the football IQ that they bring to the field.
Yeah, having veterans.
That's really important here. And it's something that they're going to miss at the beginning of the year. Hopefully Fred can play and he'll be all right. By the time we get to the Jets game, he'll be good. But it's still going to hurt him that he'll have to play more physical ball because Greenlaw won't be there with him.
Now, one thing, and we're going to use this to transition, but injuries are just going to be a part of this stream no matter what, because they impact every topic, much like they're impacting the 49ers' ability to practice right now. But I am going to go into reflecting just a little bit with you on the game that just happened, and then also maybe looking ahead to the game that is going to happen on Sunday. It'll be interesting to see if we have more first string starters playing in this game. Like I said, it's not typical for Kyle to do that, but with so many injuries and with them not having the joint practices, I wonder if the games will then be positioned a little bit differently. But we're talking about Fred Warner, and one of the guys that I thought looked very fast. Now, at times he had his, was running around a little bit. Like, I think something you mentioned is having the knowledge. So it did feel like he was a little out of place sometimes. But I thought with time and coaching, he can improve. And he definitely looked fast and physical, was Malik Mustafa.
He looked great.
Yeah. I was going to ask.
Excellent. And that's drafting a player who has the body armor already.
Yeah.
That's drafting a physical player that can handle the NFL impact.
Yes.
And look what's happening. He's playing well. He isn't hurt. He's having an impact. He's playing great. The chat mentioning that, apparently, according to NFL Network, the Niners and Aiyuk are getting closer on a deal, which would be the Niners giving ground, maybe offering more than they have in the past. That's what they said in the chat. So it's still possible that Aiyuk can stay, but we know what Aiyuk's bar is. It's the Amon-Ra St. Brown deal. If the Niners get to that, Aiyuk can stay. If the Niners don't get to that, then he's dealt.
Okay, one second, because I do want to talk. I wanted to talk about D winners and some other guys from the game that impressed me, and then ask you. But just because breaking news, and I appreciate the chat for letting us know. And if you guys have any more updates while we're talking, make sure to keep us updated. But so far it says Mike Garofalo, sorry, talking is hard for me. Good thing I have a podcast. Makes it seem like a deal between the 49ers and Brandon Aiyuk could get done, and both sides aren't far apart. The Niners have upped their offer per Mike Garofalo. Interesting. So they're giving a little and willing to maybe make the $28 mark. If they do that, I feel like Brandon Aiyuk will sign. And I feel bad for Steelers fans within the chat. I know I heard some people talking about that, like trying to compare what the Steelers would offer him and then adding in California taxes. Maybe this isn't fair, but I think that Aiyuk will take some sort of hometown discount, and mostly wants, like, taking 28 would be a slap in the face and would be embarrassing for Aiyuk. Taking 26 would be a slap in the face and embarrassing. It's so below market value that it's insulting. Right.
And 26 is what number 2 receivers are getting elsewhere. But and number 2 receivers in Florida, where you have to then factor in the taxes and say, come on now. Aiyuk in California is getting offered 26. That's not a lot. Apparently they're close to it, and so we'll see. If so, then this is a big reversal by the Niners. All throughout these contract talks, they've refused to go beyond 26. So now that they're moving closer, that's a big positive. And if they can get all of the boxes checked, then Aiyuk can stay, which is what they should have done. But why are we does it have to get to this point before you make that kind of an offer? It's frustrating as a fan that you should have made this offer a lot earlier than that.
Yeah. Mayoko says that Aiyuk has publicly said on more than one occasion that he prefers to stay with the 49ers over any other team. None of the sides have rushed into anything. That's why it's taken so long. 49ers do not want to proceed with the completion of a trade until they are firm in the belief that that is best for them, and they do not believe that at this moment. Brandon Aiyuk is not going to agree to any of the multi-year contract proposals until he fully makes up his mind that one side provides him with the best combination of price, situation, and organization. Okay. So the 49ers could be in the front running.
They could, but you still have a lot of bars where you have to clear it. You have to get over the Amon-Ra St. Brown bar, and that's not just average annual value of the contract. That's fully guaranteed money, signing bonus, the length of the deal. All of those factors have to be in this. And if that's all done, then I can see Aiyuk staying. But we'll have to see if the Niners are willing to do that. A Steeler fan already over the process. Yeah, join the club, Katie. all of us are really tired of this. And for Niner fans, it happens every year when they drag out the contract negotiation with whoever.
Little do you know, this is like, it's annoying, but this is a customary. Is that what we would say?
Annual. Right of spring. Yeah.
Yeah. We appreciate you for being in the chat. Same thing, only morale. Feels like both sides in some, obviously we want the player, 49ers want the player, 49ers fans want Brandon Aiyuk, Steelers fans want Brandon Aiyuk, but I think there is going to be some relief in no matter what happens in just like knowing where to move on from. You know what I mean? Like, even if Brandon Aiyuk goes away,
yeah,
at least,
I get the sense that this is coming to a culmination where we're finally getting to an end point, and I think that's what all of us want.
You would think, but I've thought that for the last 2 weeks. Every time we've streamed, I've been like, it's about to happen. Nope. And then there's this everyone conspires.
You're wishing, yeah.
Reports in 1 hour, and we're like, ooh, something's about to happen.
But hopefully this time it's real. That I take a lot of faith in that the Niners have finally moved toward Aiyuk.
Maybe they're blaming.
That's a very big deal.
They really didn't want to go to Irvine because Brandon Aiyuk is going to walk in his tuxedo and sign the paper, and they wanted to make sure they were there for that. Yeah.
They canceled Irvine because they didn't have enough players to go.
See, that's you would say that, Tom. You're just a hater.
Yeah, that's me.
I'm just kidding. I'm totally just kidding.
Shanahan actually hates Irvine.
To week 1 with Bosa. Yeah, but that turned out to be a really bad decision for them. And Nick Bosa himself said that. And then with 23 injured players, the 49ers need to keep BA. I'm positive that this is the main reason why the 49ers are changing their mind. I don't know if it's the main reason. He's obviously a good and valuable player to them no matter what, but I guarantee that the way that the Ricky Jacob Cowing situation has played out this offseason has only helped Brandon Aiyuk's case. I feel like that's fair to say.
You know no question.
If they would have come out and performed great, even if you're not sure that they're going to, totally replace Brandon Aiyuk, you at least have a little confidence that you can make do. But right now, they're not thinking that at all. They're like, we're shit out of luck without him.
Right.
I mean, their number one guy that's not injured right now is Deebo Samuel, and I love Deebo, but he gets injured every game. So.
Yep. Mr. Corey, yes, U.S. destroyed the world in track. Yeah, absolutely. Track had 34 of the total medals by the United States. Dominant performance.
There we go, baby.
So I think it's 34 out of 126 or something like that. So, almost a quarter, more.
Now, I want to go back to the guys that stood out to us in preseason game, but we have some Steelers fans that are making some comments in the chat, and I feel like it does bring up an interesting discussion where, do you think that Kyle Shanahan or Mike Tomlin is one a better coach to play for versus not? The interesting thing is, like, wide receivers have done well under Mike Tomlin, but then the Steelers have also had like a lot of bad wide receiver luck. You think of, I mean, obviously they got the best out of Antonio Brown, but then he went kind of crazy. I'm thinking of, remember Chase Claypool? It was like maybe 2 years ago. There was like a playoff game and he had to give the ref the ball, and instead he celebrated, and he went on like a rant saying that Steelers don't allow music within their practices. I feel like George Pickens coming out and saying that he doesn't believe wide receivers need to block. So I don't know. Maybe I feel like there's a reason that the Steelers might want a Brandon Aiyuk. They might feel like he can bring some culture to their team that maybe they need.
Could be.
I've kind of been under the assumption that it's probable that Shanahan's voice has been getting a little bit drowned out. Like, you can only make it to the dance so many times before people start second guessing you. I wonder if
players can tune you out. Yeah, tuning out can be a factor. But Pittsburgh being interested in Aiyuk, my golden rule of GMs in every team sport, the player that burns you is the player the GM wants from the other team. Aiyuk had a monster monster game against Pittsburgh in the opener last year. And that always plays into a team wanting to trade for the guy. So, Aiyuk had those incredible run blocks to free McCaffrey. He had, 6 or so catches, 2 touchdowns. Aiyuk played great. And so is it any wonder that Omar Khan is saying, I want that guy? You can look at every trade rumor in every sport, and it's the GM wanting the guy that killed him. They always remember the guy that killed him. And that's why Khan wanted Aiyuk.
That was an interesting game, too, because heading into the year, it felt like that game was going to be a little bit more difficult. Like, no offense, but Steelers fans were really hyping up the Steelers. And I was like, oh, this is, people were like.
Yeah, well, they had played so well in the preseason games. Yeah.
They ended up crushing them. But I will say, I went to Pittsburgh. When you're driving in from the airport, I don't know from every area, but, I mean, what a beautiful, you go in this mountain and there's bridges and rivers. I thought it was a beautiful place, and people.
It is. It's a beautiful city.
Nice. I feel like there's this culture around football when you're losing that fights and everything break out, and I'm sure that still happens in Pittsburgh. But I was walking around the stadium and they were losing, and I was in. You could tell that I was probably out of town from 49ers fan, and people were so kind to me. Still, I thought it was
good folks.
Visit.
Yeah. I like Pittsburgh. Good people, and a lot of water in a city always makes it more beautiful. Part of what makes San Francisco so beautiful is having the natural amphitheater of the water. Same thing with Vancouver. Same thing with Seattle. Same thing with San Diego.
I got to go to Seattle. I haven't been there.
Some of my favorite cities all have that water that grounds the city in nature and makes it more beautiful.
Yeah, and I think I've heard Seattle's like this too. Like, they have a great placement of their stadium, and that was something I loved about Pittsburgh. Is the stadium is like central. Like, when there was a game, because there was a college football game the day before the 49ers and Steelers played, and both days, I mean, just hordes of people on those streets are walking towards the stadium. It feels like the town both celebrates and shuts down. Like, it's just all about football.
Yeah. Well, that's hardcore fan base, and that's cool. Yeah, always have respect for a fan base that's there, win or lose. And the Steelers have been a great organization. They've been, the model of consistency and continuity, and great ownership with the Rooneys, and just really smart in their coaching hires. If you compare Shanahan and Tomlin, Shanahan is the better offensive mind. He's the better play designer, but I think Tomlin is the better head coach, the better leader of men.
I agree. I think that he might be like, Kyle seems to like players that ask kiss to him a little bit, where Tomlin feels, and once again, we can't know this for sure, but it's just the vibe that he gives off. I feel like Tomlin might respect some authenticity and hard work more, and what you do on the field and on the practice field more, where it feels like Tomlin cares about what you do, and he's going to reward you based on that, where Kyle cares how you treat him and how you kiss up to him.
Part of it, though Kyle also has a performance aspect. do his evaluation. Sure.
Now,
but yeah, would I rather have Tomlin or would I rather have Shanahan? I'd rather have Shanahan as the offensive coordinator and tell him that in no way, shape, or form are you allowed to be even the shadow GM of this team. And I would hire Tomlin as the head coach. Yeah, that would be better for the Niners. Would that ever happen? No. It's just Shanahan has the full trust of Jed York. He's going to be, the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost of this team as offensive coordinator, head coach, GM until the Niners don't make the playoffs for 2 years or Kyle decides it's time to move on. He's lost the year of the team.
That'll be interesting. Now, I really want to get to who impressed and disappointed, but I did, in real time as we're talking, get a DM, and it says that they couldn't super chat for whatever reason, but they're watching the stream currently, and they said, has there been a situation with a player similar to Brandon Aiyuk with all this hanging around in early August in recent memory? I can't think of a player that it's let go this long. I think Jonathan, the running back for the Colts, was a guy who I can think of.
Sure. If I could, Ashley, sorry, somebody from the coach directing Johnny Angel, Tom Trash, everyone beat him in the playoffs. Yeah, that's true. But he had a young team. He didn't have a very good quarterback. There's not a lot that the Steelers could do. But on a decision-making level, Tomlin has won the Super Bowl. Shanahan has not. And I think that that's something that we have to factor in. Tomlin has been at this for a very long time. I think that Kyle is clearly the better mind for football in terms of offensive play design. It's just that I think that Kyle is also his own worst enemy.
Yeah.
As the GM of the team,
he's
he's not investing
so far, and the reason they can't win at all.
Yeah, he's the gift and the curse. He gets them to the Super Bowl, and he's the reason they lose because he doesn't invest in the O-line. So it's both. And you just have to accept that. As a Niner fan, that's the package deal, and everybody, for the most part, and most importantly, Jed, is willing to take that.
Exactly. And then Jay Kang says sometimes you can only get so far with the coach before you need a change. Tom said, I don't think that Kyle is on the world's shortest leash right now, but I will say I felt like yesterday's press conference, he came off way more coy and timid than his normal. Normally he kind of has some sass, talks back to the media a little bit, feels really confident in whatever he's doing, even if the media is questioning him. I think that some PTSD of 2020 could be flashing for him, and he might be in a situation where he's a little bit kinder because he doesn't want to feel the wrath of disapproval with how horribly this offseason has been handled. And then but if injuries weren't a problem and it was only the mishaps, maybe they could feel, Kyle could be like, oh, well, we're going to, work around it and be fine. But it does feel like kind of a total collapse before the season has even started.
Yeah, but how much of that is baked into the cake by not having enough recovery time? Yeah, that's not something that Kyle can control or change. Is that bodies, you have an old team to begin with. It breaks down because of way too many playoff games over the last 4 years compared to the rest of the league. And you just get beat up. It was said earlier in the chat, and I agreed with it. Somebody suggested that we need to expand the rosters in the NFL. I think that's absolutely true. Particularly as the owners are pushing for 18 games. The players will say in response, we need 2 buys. The owners will give that readily. But I think that we still need to get larger rosters, too, to deal with this. And if you're going to go to 18 games, there's going to be even more injuries. Owners don't want to give on paying those extra players, but I think they're going to need to because the attrition is just going to be too large. 18 games is too many. Players are going to go down. You're going to need more players than we've got now.
I agree. Jay Kang has said this could be a bad year for the Niners. Super Bowl hangover, injuries, bad mojo. Yep. I agree. And I think that that's difficult to talk about because we're basing something off a feeling where I'm just saying, hey, going into the press conference and going into these practices and maybe the 49ers could deal with one of these things, like an Aiyuk problem or a Trent Williams problem, which people aren't even really reporting on yet. Injuries, but everyone is there. They just have to get healthy at the right time. But it's certain players wanting their money, but instead it's like 15 things that all could have like small bumps in the road are all happening at once. And it does feel like they're very unprepared. But who knows? Maybe.
Yeah, well, it isn't adding up well for, the planets are not aligning for week one the way they did last year. Last year, you could see this team had momentum. It was healthy. It was ready. This year, you're coming off the Super Bowl loss. You've got a lot of injuries already. You've got uncertainty with Aiyuk, uncertainty with Trent. A lot to be done. In terms of Trent, though, just quickly to address that, I think that once the Niners have cost certainty with Aiyuk and wherever he's going to be, if he's going to be a Niner, if he's going to be traded, once they know what that financial commitment is to Aiyuk for the next 3 years, then they can take care of Trent. I don't think it'll take long to take care of Trent. I just think that they're waiting because they need to know what those roster numbers look like. What are the specifics in the payroll, then they can take care of Trent, and they will. Kyle knows that Trent is essential to this team. Every game he misses, they lose. And that'll still be true now. They need Trent Williams or they're not going to win games.
I completely agree. And Kyle tried to poo-poo that. I forget which reporter asked him in the press conference, but they did say, like, are you waiting for the Aiyuk deal to get done before addressing Trent? And he said, no, I think we can do them both at the same time. And to an extent, I think that's true, where maybe they can work out potential deals. But I agree with you where longevity-wise, whether they're just guaranteeing the contract he has now or adding years onto that, are they going to structure it so the cap hit is high this year or high at the end of his contract? Things like that, like more like knocking out the deals rather than they might right now have like a handshake deal, like we're going to get you done, but they don't know how to structure it until they know if they're incorporating a BA deal into the future years or not.
Right. So I think what they can do with Trent is they can work out a framework. They can say, okay, we know what this is basically going to look like, but we can't hammer out the exact details until Aiyuk is taken care of. And that might have been what Kyle was talking about, is that you can work on both at the same time, but you can't hammer out the details on a deal for Williams until Aiyuk is handled.
Completely agree. Get Murphy, I don't know if you joined a little bit late. We agree with you. It does feel like there's movement on the Aiyuk news. About 30 minutes ago, Mike Garofalo said that Aiyuk prefers to stay with the 49ers and that the 49ers have since upped their offer. Potentially this is coming to a head. It does feel like both teams have kind of offered what they're going to offer. BA has made his stance clear and the 49ers have made their stance clear. Potentially they gave him one last offer, raise their deal a little bit, whether it's, exactly what Pittsburgh is offering or a little bit lower. They might kind of be saying, do you want to accept this deal? Yes, take it. If not, we're going to trade you to the Steelers. So hopefully this immediate reporting that came out, like I said, about 30 minutes ago, is either leading to a trade coming up because Aiyuk's not willing to accept it and maybe the 49ers would rather just get it done and over with and start moving past it, or Aiyuk's willing to come down from his number a little bit more and meet the 49ers. So Corey says,
hopefully they can hammer it out. If they're close, great. But the important thing is the Niners finally moved toward Aiyuk, and that's what needed to happen in order for something to get done.
I disagree with Triple Crown winner says the 49ers can still win games without Aiyuk and Trent. Without Aiyuk, they can win some games, especially the way that Kyle Shanahan structures his offense. Unfortunately, the deep threat ability isn't a huge part of it, but I do think it will impact the spacing of the field. A huge criticism under Jimmy Garoppolo was just that the defenses were always really close to the front of the line. And then with having a weak offensive line, that makes things even more difficult. When defenses know they don't have a guy who can beat them deep, they're more willing to come up. That can cause a Purdy injury. So yes, maybe without Aiyuk, they can win some games, but I think it makes it more difficult, not only for them to win games in general, but for Purdy to stay healthy and them to have a full offense. But I do agree, without Aiyuk, although difficult, I think they could win some. Without Trent Williams, they don't make the playoffs, in my opinion. Brock Purdy.
No.
I don't want to put that on anyone, but this, all the healthy offensive linemen were starting in the game that just happened against the Titans. I know someone was in here and they were like, that's the third string guys. No. Everyone is injured on our team. Those are the guys that we have available to play right now. So
right.
Scary out there.
But even if we did have the full complement of backups, this team hasn't won when Trent Williams doesn't play. And that's history, it's fact.
Yeah. Johnny Angel says we need to see Ricky too. Ricky's injured, so we're not gonna
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's the main storyline is that everyone on the 49ers is injured, and both Pittsburgh fans and 49er fans are holding their breath to see. Honestly, Aiyuk played this kind of perfect, and it seems up to him with, is he going to take a small discount and stay with the 49ers, or does he want to play for Tomlin and the Steelers, and the 49ers are just going to finally cut strings and let it go? But we don't know, because we know John Lynch doesn't like to lose the deal, and Kyle Shanahan seems over it and like he wants to get something done so they can just start moving on. Before we end this, I've been trying to get to this for like 40 minutes, but we keep having breaking Aiyuk news. Really quickly, players that stood out in an impressive way and in a disappointing way to you. My impressive would be Malik Mustafa. I thought was number one.
Yeah.
Key winners, I thought was good. Could use some work, but I thought was fast and looked good. Those were my main guys that I saw there.
I would add Jordan Mason to that list. I thought he looked good.
Mason looked great.
And so we'll see. Yeah.
Especially with CMC injured. I wonder
they're going to need him. They will.
I wonder if they lay off Mason actually in the next couple preseason games. Like, he might have been a guy who was going to play, and maybe they need him to play no matter what because of injuries. But I think he's solidifying his spot. Like, he's always done well as an angry runner, and he displayed that. I don't know why someone said Mason's terrible. He's always had he averaged 5.7 yards per carry against the Titans. He's averaged like 6 yards a carry in previous years. Always been a great runner. His main problem, which was something he himself addressed, was his pass protection, more knowledge of the offense. And he said that that's something that he really committed to. He bought a jugs machine, has been working on his pass game, and has been doing homework, sitting front row, getting to know Bobby Turner, Christian McCaffrey, really studying the game. He already had his running ability. He just needed to marry both sides, really grow up. And he said this offseason, that was something he
that it all came together. Corey asks, Kyle's ego responsible for the Aiyuk drama? It's one of many factors. Yeah, it's just you go to the Niners strategy of always lowballing and not offering a fair market deal to start the negotiation. Their tactic of always dragging things out and then making an offer at the very last minute. That's part of it. Aiyuk being somewhat immature and kind of scattershot in what he wanted is that, he had a baseline idea of what he wanted, but he also wanted to get more attention. And so he did things that were attention seeking that I think hurt and undermined his cause in the contract negotiations. So there's a lot of stuff going on, but by and large, I would say that the majority of the blame falls to the Niners in how they approach contract negotiations just in general.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Someone says, as a Steelers fan, I envy your QB room. I think Brock Purdy has been very impressive. When talking about impressive versus disappointing, I thought Josh Allen, I thought Brandon Allen and Josh Dobbs, if only we could put them together and make a Josh Allen. I thought that they did decent, but would be guys that I could think could win a game if Brock Purdy was injured for a short amount of time and needed, Kyle Shanahan could scheme up a game for them.
As long as everybody was healthy.
Could carry the team for multiple games.
Yeah. Allen, if he has all the other starters around him, can win a game. After that, good luck.
Dobbs did well. Like, it was interesting, right? Because you saw both sides. Like, he had a throw where the line breaks down on him. He scrambles out, makes the throw downfield. Super impressive. Shortly after that, he makes his touchdown run. Very impressive. But then when he's going for the 2-point conversion, basically throws an interception. And you're just kind of like, in 2 minutes, you see the entire experience on how
Yeah, well, you have to take the good with the bad when there's a player that doesn't have a lot of reps.
Yeah, definitely doesn't have a lot of reps. He maybe had a little bit more exciting just with his legs than Allen, but you could tell that consistency would end up being a problem. Honestly, for both of them, Allen was definitely more, you could tell he's been involved in this system, but doesn't really have the arm strength or zip to, make anything impressive. Just kind of.
He made some good throws against Tennessee where he zipped the ball into a short window. And so, I think that there's no drop-off in arm talent when you go from Purdy to Allen just in terms of velocity.
Okay.
Allen can throw a similar fastball. That's not an issue, really. My concern is more of Josh Dobbs and whether he can get to the point that he needs to in this offense where it's see it, throw it, where you have to process it quickly and you have to throw with anticipation and you need to put the ball on target. And I think that those latter factors are things that Dobbs is going to have to work on. He's not there yet. He's a good athlete. He can process. He's a smart guy, astronaut. But in terms of the timing necessary in this offense and the accuracy necessary, he doesn't have those things. So let's see what he can do with more reps. I'm interested to see what Dobbs can do in the next playoff game or preseason.
Any disappointments for you? Maybe you were hoping for better.
Yeah, well, I was hoping for better just in the run defense collectively, but I understand that when this team doesn't have Drake Greenlaw, the run defense isn't going to be as good. And that's just a fact of life. But I wanted to also see better run defense from the secondary. They need that this year, and I was disappointed in the run D from that group collectively because we're going to have to lean on them. The Niners are going to have to get run defense and blitzing from the secondary. That's going to be vital if they're going to make simulated pressure a thing and make that part of their mix. So that was my main disappointment defensively was I didn't like the run D that I saw from the secondary. That has to improve.
Yeah, I did see the 49ers worked out Anderson. I don't want to try to. They worked out 3 D lineman players today. Just, I think, backup guys that they're trying to add into the team. Mr. Corey says, no Armstead, Greenlaw, or Hufanga equals crappy defense.
True, but part of the pivot this year is that they want to rely on these young guys in the secondary to provide great run D. When they had run defense problems last year, Kyle pointed to the secondary as the cause for the run defense breakdowns. So those guys have to step up. Right now, they aren't there.
I completely agree. Ricardo says, did T.O.'s son get cut? He did get waived, but it was, I think, because of an injury. And I'm pretty sure there was a hand injury that he had. And there were reports that he was potentially, if he accepts it, that they're willing to have him on the practice squad. But he might be trying to see if he can get picked up by somewhere else. I don't think he's signed. They haven't announced that he's with the practice squad yet. But I was pretty disappointed by that because he was doing well in camp, aside from having some troubles catching the ball. But I don't think they would have, until he got injured, I don't think they would have cut him. But I think that injury kind of for them was like, all right, well, our starters are already injured, so we can't have backups injured type of thing.
Right.
But any last takeaways from the game? I think we're just going to keep having similar reports of Brandon Aiyuk until it's finalized.
Yeah. But I like the direction it's headed in, and that's a great development and something brand new that's really worth it. Any updates with Trent? No, but again, I think that the details in the Trent deal have to wait until you have the details on Aiyuk.
Yeah,
and then Trent can go forward.
We're anticipating, and this is, we don't have insider knowledge, but we're anticipating that they probably have a handshake deal with Trent that obviously they're going to pay him. They need him to be around, but they're waiting to see if they cut Brandon Aiyuk. It might be smarter for them to make this year a cap-heavy year for Trent Williams because they can afford that with a low Purdy contract and make the end of Trent's guaranteed money lesser. Or if they do end up extending Brandon Aiyuk, then they need that money allocated now. So they might want to work it so they have a higher cap hit later on. And so
push it back. Yeah.
What we're anticipating is they're going to pay him no matter what, but they don't know exactly how to structure it until they figure out, are they moving off of Brandon Aiyuk or are they paying him? So
right. Other takeaways from the game, I was really disappointed in their special teams. Kick coverage was bad.
So bad.
It's just, come on, guys.
Like,
are you practicing this?
The team was starting on the other team was starting on like the 36, the 34.
Well, Tennessee ended up with the ball and they were on the 9 or 15. Come on. It's just every year it seems like the special teams is just this albatross slung around the neck of the Niners where they can never quite overcome whatever special teams disaster.
And Larry
is headed their way. Just bad.
Larry Krueger asked in one of the conferences yesterday that they had with Kyle Shanahan, like, oh, do you think maybe it would be smart just for you guys to kick to the back of the end zone, have the other team start on the 30? With how bad this special teams is, potentially that is the smart choice. But I would be disappointed as hell if they did that, because I know maybe right now so far in preseason you haven't seen any super flashy things. I think a lot of that is teams not wanting to give up what they're actually going to do. I feel like there's some creative as hell special teams coordinators out there, and we're going to see some exciting things come regular season.
Oh, sure, in the return game. But are the Niners ever going to get better in their kick coverage? Well, based on what we've seen so far, no.
No.
But I'm with you that I would still want to have some kicks, especially in the preseason, to test that coverage and see if it improves.
I like.
Don't just kick away.
Mr. Corey's just reading Kyle Shanahan. Special teams and defending read option quarterback runs always suck. Yeah, for sure. I'm seeing some stuff go on about Dak and stuff, but I feel like we might. Someone, Ricardo says, wasn't the third team special teams out there? No.
Well, with all the injuries they have, I wonder how many people got special teams reps, given that they just have this rash of injuries.
That's true.
Who's supposed to be out there? We don't know.
Yeah.
But part of the thing with special teams, it's usually a bunch of linebackers, safeties, DBs. Yeah. So we'll see what they can do, but they have to improve.
Yeah, George Odom was out there and not out there. I know he's injured right now, but I can't remember if he played in the regular season. But it won't matter, or in the not regular season, but the preseason game. But it won't matter now because he's injured. So hopefully the 49ers can get healthy. I ask you this at the end of every show that we've had for pretty much the whole offseason, but definitely been getting down to the wire the last, I want to say, 3 weeks. Is Aiyuk on the team on the 49ers because I know we have both Steelers and 49ers fans. Is Aiyuk a Steeler? Is he a 49er? Are we in this exact same situation happening again next week? What do you anticipate for our next show?
I think he'll sign, and it's the best thing for the Niners to have Brandon Aiyuk long-term on this team.
I completely agree. I hope that, and honestly, a lot of this BA, a lot of people doubted him, thought he had no leverage, no option power, however you want to say it. And there was a time that even I thought BA was being a little bit messy, but turns out he's handled this very well. I want to trust him and think that the 49ers are his number one option. Cannabis King 420. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this. Not clickbait. These are reports by Ian Rapport and Mike Rapport.
And that's when the show started also. The news that the Niners and Aiyuk are close happened during this stream. Yep.
And then, anyways, I keep saying we're going to end it, but one last comment before we end it. Or hold on. Yes, we have our D-line needs to step up more this year. We have to get a big guy at the
nose tackle spot to help slow the run.
Yeah,
they do. Yeah, they need DJ Jones back. He's a free agent at the end of this year, and then they can go and bring him back. I think they need to do that or pattern the DJ Jones skill set and target that early in the draft next year.
Yeah. very, very lots of holes that are going to be needed to cover up. Then Mr. Corey says, before the show is over, Tom, I'm glad you got good track and field, got to watch good track and field with your father. Me and Tom we both like our dads a lot. My dad, I just read his comment, love you, daddy. And I loved hearing Tom talk about that as well.
Well, we're both lucky to have wonderful fathers that we love very much. And in my case, you guys bonded over Niners.
Yep.
And Dad and I bonded over track. Yes. He took me to my first track meet in 1971, way back when. And then the Olympic trials in 72. And then we were lucky enough to go to the World Championships a couple of times. And it's just a special bond for us with track. So to be able to fly down to San Jose and spend that time with him was gold. I'm just so grateful to have that time. I love my dad very much, and just we had a wonderful time together. It was great.
Hell yeah. Everyone watching, make sure to, if you can, hopefully you're lucky enough to give your dad a call or a text, tell him you said, I love you. And thank you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure to freaking like and subscribe. Potentially a deal's going down, and I'll go live as soon as a deal does go down, so turn on your notifications. Tom will be writing a banger of an article, basically pushing the 49ers, whatever happens, because honestly, if they sign him now, egg on their face for not getting it done earlier.
But they would have Aiyuk, and they would have a better chance this year. So all's well that ends well, sort of. True. But organizational malpractice, yeah.
I expect tomatoes to be thrown at them no matter what.
Oh, sure. Yeah, there will be.
Just a horribly executed offseason, but been a lot of fun to discuss with you. I am thinking that he'll sign before our show next week. But who knows? I wasn't sure. I thought he was going to get traded before this show. So changes every week depending on the reports. Thank you so much, Tom.
Thank you, Ashley. Great time with
you. And thank you so much for all the comments. People have been commenting throughout the whole show. Appreciate the Steelers fans in there, all of the viewers. Make sure, like I said, to like and subscribe to Ashley Aireonna, my YouTube channel. Follow Tom Jensen, or Niners Cast on Twitter. He writes for Sports Illustrated, SI.com, always coming out with really, really intriguing articles. And we'll both have updates on Aiyuk for you. So appreciate you guys so much. I'm going to end it here before we get more comments, but thank you guys so much. Bye, guys. Have a good one.